Hi everyone, The Lone Wolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And has anything happened last week? Yeah, well, there's this small little forum post that CCP Rise made that the Sino mechanic gets nerfed. Well, the mechanic itself doesn't change that much, it's just that it won't be fittable on anything but Force Recon ships and the Covered Ops battleships. So that's a huge change, very controversial in the player base, and I actually made a poll about it, and apparently I think most people agree that there will be a lot more salt coming from this change than from the Nullsec blackout. So basically the Chaos era is going into overdrive. We're getting with the September release a big change to the Sino. And as a result, there's going to be real chaos in Nullsec, and this should have its impact on the economy as well. There's definitely some short-term impact, of course, on the ships that are involved, but I think looking at it longer term, what a lot of people consider to be a safe activity now will take a big hit, and that's going to be the Rorqual mining under the super cap umbrella, and same thing with like the super ratting, because right now what they can do is they can just fit a Sino on those ships. They can go invincible, in fact, when it comes to Rorqual for a little bit, and drop the defense supers and carriers and things like that in order to save the ships, and that will no longer be possible as easily. I mean, you can still get like a recon, a cloaky recon with a Sino on close to your ship, but that's gonna get primaried and is actually not as strong as, of course, a Rorqual that has pressed his panic button. So that's one huge change. There are also some small events coming. Well, GM Week, I'm not sure if I should call it a small event. It's actually gonna involve lots of smaller events across the next week, including a streamed fleet with the GMs. Last year that was actually pretty fun to watch. I went there with like a cloaky ship to get some footage from that. Not sure what you can do as a solo player in there, but they will potentially have Plex in their cargo holds, so perhaps a cloaky loot snatching ship could be something that we might try when it comes to GM Week and the GM fleet at least. And there's going to be like scavenging hunts, things like that. Definitely take a look at eveonline.com. On the articles website you will find out what CCP has planned for that week. Yep, there's also a new EVE Pulse with CCP Falcon, basically reiterating most of the stuff that I've said here. It was mostly about GM Week. So let's move on to the New Eden store. Take a look at this one, and yeah, new skin. Look at that Vital Shift Ego skin. Looks, in my opinion, pretty damn cool. A black skin with orange stripes. Look at this. This looks very cool, like a circuit board pattern a little bit. Very nice. I love it on the Manticore. I think it looks really nice on the Jackdaw as well, but you have some amazing Jackdaw alternatives already. But then look at something like the Cerberus, that looks really nice. Basilisk as well. Eagle. Ferox, yeah, I think this is gonna be a pretty popular one. And then down here the Golem looks really nice, but this one, look at this Charon Vital Shift Ego skin. That it already has this bit of a circuit board feel to it, and now it just adds to that. Very cool skin in my opinion. Decently pricey, right? 700 disc for the Charon skin, 250 I think for the subcapitals, but it looks amazing. So this is a great skin. If you're looking for another way to support EVE Online, this is definitely a possibility. I'm a bit surprised that there's no other supers or anything like that, but you just have the Phoenix as well, and then you've got some subcaps here, but it looks really cool. This is a very nice new skin. And then we are going to move on to the market, of course. That's why we are here. So let's get started with some Plex and stuff coming in at 425. And here we go. You can see that we have basically formed a bottom, but in a very violent way. I didn't think that we would see this quickly. So on the chart here we dropped to 3.3 million as the bottom, and you can see that we now recover back above 3.5 million On the daily averages, trade volumes, nothing too special, so I'm guessing that whatever happened, and that the market decided this was low enough, which is a little bit strange to me, because I would think that the Sino change would put more pressure on the Plex prices if you're no longer able to get the super ticks on the super carriers, or well, you can still do it, but it's going to become a lot more risky. And logistics might just become a bit more expensive as well, with some jump freighter pilots needing to do quite a bit of training and to do quite a bit of investing in the right ships to keep their supply lines up and running. I thought we would see more pressure on the price of Plex. On the other hand, if that's actually what, now that I think about it, if the jump freighter need for skill points, need for ships, might just be what is dictating this jump here, because that does mean that you need quite a bit of capital all of a sudden to get that done on time for the September release. So we'll see if the skill injectors do a jump as well, but we obviously see a bit of a recovery from the Plex markets. 3.75 million for the sellers, 3.5 million for the buyers. That's in JITA. In the player-owned trade hubs, 3.64 million. That's still up quite substantially from last week, and then staying around 3.5 million for the buyers. Apparently that's where the bottom buy prices are going to compete at for now. And yeah, that does mean that you could have bought for 3.3 million about a week ago, but now it does look like we have a decent recovery. The skill extractor market, of course, mirroring this very closely. I'm gonna quickly get this one. Well, actually, maybe I shouldn't get this one out of the way, because he's part of the injector aspect of all of it, because what we see here, multiple power trains, if it is getting back below 1.5 billion, bit on the uptrend at the tail end, but still below that even on the latest data points. Volumes are still up a little bit, so you can see that we're still absorbing that that sale from CCP, and so we're basically flat with a slight downtrend, but you're able to buy a multiple power trains for a bit above 1.5 billion bars, or a decent chunk below 1.5 billion. So that is the current price range for just training time, straight up training time for a secondary character. We're not seeing a big demand jump, but here in the skill extractors, I am clearly seeing in the last week an increase in volumes as well, an increase in price, and we're up to 412 million for the sellers, 405 million for the buyers. These have been forced up quite a bit as well. And then, of course, will all of this impact the injector price? Here are the large no, that's a surprise. All right, continuing on the downtrend, now hitting 800 million ISK. 810 for the sellers, 780 for the buyers. That means that you can grab large scale injectors for a price below 800 million ISK. You can see the top at 1 billion. That's a 20% decrease in price. And now here comes my speculative opinion. If you're seeing what Plex does, if you're seeing what the extractors are doing, and especially once multiple power trade certificates are going to stall here, then this would be the time to jump in on the large scale injectors, because this decrease is not going to last. We will probably hit bottom prices very soon here. Lowest for the year was 700. We're at 780. Potential is up to 1 billion. I think it would make sense that if you're looking for that investment that has an aspect of it that is defense against inflation, right, because this has a skill extractor's Plex component to it, but you also want a little bit of risk, a little bit of gambling on well, the desire for skill points in the game, a little bit of extra volatility, then this is the go-to item. It's also a decent price. I mean, 800 million ISK is something that is doable for a larger scale investment, I would say. And so yeah, large scale injectors, look at this chart, look at what's happening with Plex and at the extractors, and I think that it makes a lot of sense to try and grab some below 800 million at this point. Small scale injectors continuing the downtrend as well, and as I've said, I personally am expecting at least a little bit of a bump from all the extra training that the jump freighters, also the jump freighter sinos, have to do potentially. Although yeah, it is true that we're just coming out of the skill point season, which is going to last for 1 more week. That's quite a few free skill points. I haven't done anything with them myself, and so if those those alts find themselves in that same situation. If they took the time to kill a rat or kill a couple of rats for that extra SP, the impact may be lowered by this event over the last summer. So small scale injectors, let's take a quick look at the chart, continuing the downtrend as well. Currently selling for 166 million ISK, buyers at 156, so that is decently cheap as well, considering the bottom at 210. Not as pronounced and as good looking in my opinion as the large scale injector. I mean, this is the volatility that we're looking for. Less than 2 months, 20% loss, and only like 80 million away from the bottom when it comes to the buyers. I think there's lots of potential right here for an investment. And then we have the daily alpha injectors that are bouncing off of the 50 million mark, currently selling for 56 million, buyers at 51.5. Completely different, I think, from anything that's been going on with the Sino change, because the Sino is an Omega item. So really these daily alpha injectors might have a little bit of an impact, show perhaps that some alpha clone skill point farms, is that even possible? I don't even think that that's possible. So yeah, this is completely different. This is more of a new player metric, I think, and daily alpha injectors, a little bump up here. But yeah, this Plex turnaround is pretty massive, and then the large scale injector chart does look pretty appealing in my opinion. Let's move on to the minerals, coming in at 1125. And when it comes to the minerals, you may already have noticed on the ticker that Tritanium did a little bit of a jump back to 7 ISK, and in fact today's daily average is back above 7 ISK as well. In JITA we are talking about 720 almost for the sellers, 680 for the buyers, a bit of a margin opening up. And here my theory is that a part of this is gonna be the Sino update playing its role, because well, Rorcal mining just got a bit more dangerous yet again. There are solutions for the biggest and richest parties in the game, but across the board this should mean an even harder time mining in the Rorcal in Nullsec. Next up we've got Pyrite that does a little bit of a jump. Look at that, 5 ISK, 1 year high for Pyrite. Never thought we'd be able to say that again, but here it is. 487 for the sellers, 471 for the buyers, and a nice little jump to a actual high point. It does look like we're talking a little bit of a turnaround here when it comes to the minerals, and perhaps CCP is looking at these economic numbers as well. I mean, some of these minerals have been crushed so much by all of the changes that part of the chaos aim is perhaps to bring value back to even the Tech 1 chips, to even mining efforts for newer players in HiSec that potentially can only go up to the Orca and cannot compete with the potential yield of a fully fitted and fully safe Rorcal, which is perhaps part of the objective here. And from that perspective, well, Pyrite seeing it go back to 5 ISK is very good news, of course. Next up we've got Mexlon continuing its decline, 55 ISK, 55 for the sellers, 51 for the buyers. And then if you look at it from the perspective that you're expecting lower yields in Nullsec, and that Mexlon is the bottleneck in Nullsec, this actually makes a little bit of sense this way, because you would expect that extra demand from Nullsec is actually gonna decrease, because well, overall their yields should decrease as well. And what can we expect from the supply of Mexlon? Well, that's gonna stay pretty steady, because when it comes to what's needed in Nullsec, it comes from HiSec. There's no need to think that supply is gonna dry up all of a sudden. So I think from that supply demand dynamic, this decrease in price for Mexlon, that's actually counter to what's happening with Tritanium, with Pyrite, etc. Makes sense actually here, because it is the Nullsec bottleneck, and so if demand there decreases, supplies will tend to stay pretty stable across HiSec, where well, the bulk of it is being produced, because it is getting imported into Nullsec, and then you get this result, of course, for the price. After that, we've got Isogen, bit of a bump that doesn't last very long. Tried to get back to 17.5 ISK. It's now at 16.26, 15.17 for the buyers. Supply-wise, yeah, you're still seeing, even despite the fact that it's just a couple sellers a day, it's just still too much for the market. Isogen, I think, the biggest loser of the change of the last couple of years when it comes to mineral composition, the mining ships, moon mining and all of that stuff. Still suffering quite heavily, trying to from time to time get back up just a little bit, but until we see like a 20-25 ISK range, I think that we can still consider this one the biggest loser of the bunch. Then we've got Noxium, and this is a substantial trend break here over the last year and even couple of months. 300 to 350 to 325 was definitely possible most of the time, but here finally, here in early August, we can see that we broke through the 300 barrier, and now we're going down straight past the 290 as well. So it's now less than 290 for the sellers, 282 for the buyers. And is this on oversupply? I can't say that. I mean, there is a decent amount of Noxium for sale, but we can't say that we are being flooded by it in the last couple of days. Of course, this is after the big fall of the price as well. So hopefully we can stem the tide by not keeping on flooding the Noxium market. But this is a pretty massive trend break. Even if supplies would stop and we would be able to stem this decrease in price, we'll probably get back to the 300 range, and that's already gonna be enough for quite a few sellers to bring it back to the market. That's my expectation, at least. I do think we'll start to move in the 300 range, unless the general trend can continue to push minerals up a little bit, then we might just get back up there. But for now, I am going to keep in mind that Noxium is very cheap and that this is a real trend break all of a sudden. It happened once and twice and 3 times before. But yeah, this feels like it's got quite a bit of momentum, and that is very late to the party, less than 290 when supplies finally start to diminish. So let's not expect a quick recovery here. I may be wrong on that, but I don't see it happening. Next up, we have Zydrine, which is flat at around 500 ISK, just above that, so 520 almost for the sellers, 492 for the buyers. Not much to say here, except that yeah, fresh supplies, are they going somewhere else then? Nope. No, 85 days is the last one, so it's been quite a while actually since Zydrine has been brought to the market, despite the stable price, so that's kind of a weird one. And then we have Megasite, that is actually up in price, a little bit of a shot to the arm back towards 500 ISK. It's 495 for the sellers, 431 for the buyers. On lots of new supply here as well. Look at that, last 24 hours. That's quite a difference between Zydrine supply and Megasite supply. And here I do see a bit of a normalization. There's little reason for Megasite to be that much less expensive than Zydrine, and so here a bit of a market correction. I think we should keep an eye on Megasite and Zydrine in the upcoming weeks to see how all of that is going to evolve. And then finally we have Morphite, that is continuing on the winning trend. Tech2 related, of course, quite a bit different from the other minerals, with a peak at 13,500 ISK, you could easily say. Right now still 12,200 for the sellers and 11,000 for the buyers. Definitely a margin opening up, but this is still a great price to sell if you manage to buy before mid-May, I would say. For less than 8,000 ISK, you're looking at a 50% profit. Not bad at all, and that 20-day moving average trend is looking quite nice as well. So Morphite, that's the ticket, guys. If you can grab that, that is the one mineral that is clearly at the 1-year high point, trading for well above its normal value, or its average value for the year. Pyrite is there as well, but we're talking 4 to 5 ISK, so that's quite a bit different in scale, of course. Next up, the PI market, coming in at 1855. There we go. Let's go over these. As I've said, my general expectation has been that we would see demand drop off with lower activity over the summer months, and supply stay the same, because my thinking is that people that have fully functioning PI planets that have fully trained, those tend to stay in the game to keep that up and running, to keep that passive income flowing. And so far I've been decently wrong on that prediction for the summer. Now the summer CCP did introduce this login reward of getting at least some skill points for a couple of kills that may have kept things in check on the decreased activity front, in my opinion. We'll have to see how it evolves in the later months of August, though those tend to be rather dangerous months as well, if memory serves. So here we got broadcast nodes that actually went up to 2.1 million, now going back down a little bit, and we're talking still above 2.1 million for the sellers, less than 1.9 million for the buyers. So that is still a pretty good buy price and a pretty wide margin between the two, but less than, yeah, actually, is it really 183? Yeah, 183. That's not bad, actually. That's let's see. That's around here. That's definitely pretty low for the buyers. So here we have a pretty massive margin opening up between sellers and buyers of broadcast nodes. If you're expecting a structure to come, for instance for the Nullsec blackout, then this would be the time to grab some of these on the buy side of the broadcast nodes, of course. Next up we get the construction blocks, and yeah, against my expectation, managing to crawl its way back above 11,000 discs, so above average. I would say 12,000 for the sellers, almost 11,000 for the buyers. That is quite a nice recovery for construction blocks that went pretty low, 10,000 disc on quite a few days in the last few months here. So nice recovery. Then we've got consumer electronics that has been able to maintain a price range, at least for the sellers, of around 13,000 disc. Decently average for the entire year. 13,100 for one seller, most of them at 13,600, so a touch above average for the sellers. Decent margin again, look at that, buyers 12,200, that's a decent margin between sellers and buyers here, but the average price seems to be doing quite okay here as well. So the potential still exists, right? That big 12,000 and buyer price, same here with the broadcast nodes that is this low. The potential for a drop-off still exists, but it's just not materializing at this point. Now for coolants, we had a bit of a bumpy ride here, going up to 13,000 discs and falling right back off to 11k, but we're back in the recovery, so that's nice. 13,200 for the sellers, 11,200 for the buyers. Again, decently good sell price, 13,000 and is above average, but the margin between sellers and buyers is quite nice. So be careful on a bit of a lack of demand. We could actually drop in price quite quickly, and yeah, I'm gonna keep my eye out for that. Enriched uranium, very strong performance even over the last couple of months. 15k was definitely possible. Bit of a fallback, but yeah, look at the average. 13 to 14,000 is the average for the year. We're still talking 14,700 for the sellers, 13,700 for the buyers. That's actually a more decently normal margin for this good. So enriched uranium, well above average. Very strong performance again so far this summer. Then the integrity response drone, surprisingly stable, just below 2.5 million. There's not much to say. 2.5 for the sellers, 2.4 for the buyers. That's a really stable average price for the year as well. Mechanical parts, fuel related, this one has been suffering a little bit, but keep in mind 11,000 disc for mechanical parts for something that's so easy to make is actually not that bad, and it's almost 12,000 for the sellers and then 9,500 for the buyers. So you do start to see that lack of demand. 9,500, that's right here on the chart, that is below the entire chart. So there is this buy opportunity, but it's gonna be tricky to actually materialize that considering the average price that we're seeing on the charts. But yeah, this is quite a margin, right? I mean, we're talking 2,350 ISK of margin on something that is selling for 11,800 ISK, which is its normal average price. That is a sign, in my opinion, that we are starting to see a bit of a lack of demand, and yeah, surprisingly little activity outside of JITA for PI. I thought it would take over more with the tax changes, but nope, that's still all being traded here. Next up, the nuclear reactors finally going back up, but it's basically the sellers that are winning out for a couple of days. We're up to 95,500 for the sellers, 90,000 for the buyers. All right, one buyer going up a little bit, but this is just not volatile enough because of a lack of volumes right now. Then we've got organic mortar applicators slowly continuing on its high trend here, 1.2 million on average. Yeah, above that for the sellers, bit above 1.1 million for the buyers. Organic mortar applicators, surprisingly strong performance in the last couple of months, well above average. Then we have the robotics. This one is dropping off substantially, now really below 100,000 disc. We're talking just below that for the sellers, 93,500 for the buyers. That is starting to get a little bit below the chart here as well. So again, a bit of a margin opening up. Those buyers are not showing up anymore. Then we've got the self-harmonizing power cores, actually another surprisingly strong performance here in the last month, a jump up to close to 1-year high point, 2.2 million for the sellers, a bit below 2.2 million for the buyers. That is, yep, a decently good price for self-harmonizing power cores, not something I would be investing into at this point, to be honest. Then we have the superconductors. These are back down to a less than average price. Here we get 11,400 for the sellers. That's still decently respectable, but look at the buyers. We get a couple at 10,000 disc, and then it's down to 9,000 disc if we can get rid of these 5 competing buy orders. The lack of demand is starting to make itself known, and here in superconductors, we are talking 10,000 disc for the buyers. You can already start a small investment if you want to, and if you're patient, we can get rid of these 5, and then you get a no-brainer investment because it's 9,000 and even below that for the buy orders there. So this is what I was expecting to happen more. You could clearly see a bit of a downtrend, and then on these low points here, that's when you should try to grab some really cheap superconductors. It's pretty obvious that we have decent supplies in the last couple of days as well. It's still coming in, nobody is buying, and that's when this bottom drops out. That's where you can actually grab some cheap stuff for the, well, potentially 14,000 disc worth superconductors. Buy it for 10k, that's a decent margin right there. Next up we get the test cultures. That one is still staying well below average at this point, less than oof man, this is yeah, this is bad. This is showing that lack of demand yet again, because sellers have gone from 7,400 and now they're actually competing at the highest buy price. So now you're grabbing test cultures even from the sell orders for less than 6,500 discs. That is pretty crazy, but we also can clearly see on this chart that it's completely not demanded in any way, shape or form. So test cultures is doing really badly. I think this is the time to actually grab some really cheap stuff. Just don't go overboard with the volumes. Be careful to not put all your eggs in one basket, but at some point this will turn around as well. Then we have the wetware mainframes that are again doing decently well, staying at 2.2 million, just below that now for the sellers, and a bit below 2.1 million for the buyers. Not much to say. This is an average for the advanced PA materials, doing quite okay, I must say. Very surprised that they've managed to do so well, despite the fact that CCP has not officially announced any plans for a new structure. Alright, next up, advanced moon materials coming in at 2750. Let's take a look at these, see if we can spot any trends. So we've got the Galente crystalline carbonite, not bad, jumping back up to 160. Nice little recovery here in the last week. 162 for the sellers, 155 for the buyers, and back to a slightly above average price, so not bad. Ferrite carbide is next, also still going back up. I think this could be the Sino effect as well. Little jump here in the last couple of days, and back to a slightly above average price as well. 166 for the sellers, 152 for the buyers. Not bad. Then we have the titanium carbide. That is the exact opposite. Did have the biggest war spike in June with the deployment of the Imperium, but is now back down to 175, well actually 190 for the sellers and 175 for the buyers. The chart here is showing 175. This is going to be jumping up right here at the tail end. Then we get tungsten carbide, also a bit of a jump here, and average price 200-ish. Sellers 207, buyers 202, not bad, also decently good. Definitely all of them seem to have recovered back to an average price for the year, or slightly above that. Then we have the metamaterials, photonic metamaterials, little jump up here, look at that, very nice. Average price maybe 18 to 19k. And right now 19,000 for the sellers, 18,600 for buyers. Pretty narrow margin and back on an average price. Good recovery here. Plasmonic metamaterials clearly recovered. We're back above average on a bit of a lack of supply. Let's take a quick look in perimeters. There is some here, but competing at 24,400 disc. That is a pretty good price. Then we have the plasmonic metamaterials, oh no, non-linear metamaterials, sorry. After 3 spikes with higher peaks at 27,530k and then above 30k, we're now back down a bit, but this is still 26,000 and 25,000. This is still definitely a reasonable price for non-linear metamaterials. Basically, this one did not drop off as badly as some of the others here, down to 15k, down to 17.5k. Yeah, non-linear managed a bit of a stronger performance. Then we have the terahertz metamaterials that are also well above average, staying above 25,000 disc for the sellers, 23,300 for the buyers. Bit of pressure here, but doing really well. So this is a nice recovery, and I think that this does show that when a lot of these were really low, playing with 1 year low points, it always felt so risky to invest, to buy right here for 140 or less than that, because look at the trend that you've been seeing in the last 6 months or so. But yeah, the recovery does happen, especially here in the scales era. And so this one, for me, if you look at this chart over here, right, when we're still below 140, it is very reminiscent of what's happening right now with test cultures right there. So keep that in mind. Nothing lasts forever in the markets, and right now the advanced movement materials, at least most of these metamaterials and these carbides, have recovered quite nicely and are trading back for average or above average prices for the year. Next up, we still have some other stuff in the advanced movement materials. The fermionic condensates, after a nice peak up to 120,000 discs, do seem to have overreacted a little bit with some extra supplies, and so we are back down to less than 100,000 discs by quite a margin. So this can happen as well, of course. We went to like a 1 year high point, and then we probably just saw too much supply coming, trying to take advantage of that, and as a result we're back to a little bit below average for this one material. Ferrogel went back to below average, but look at this late jump in the last week or so. Not bad, and that puts it right on an average range. 48,000 for the sellers, narrow margin as well, 47,000 for the buyers. That's pretty good here, back on an average. Fullerides have generally been a bit oversupplied, so still below 1,000 disc. 962 for the sellers, 950 for the buyers. We try to get 950 to show. Well, we've been below 900, but this does not feel like one that's doing very strongly. You could try to grab some perhaps and then hope for another spike. Hypersynaptic fibers, another nice recovery, back to above 14,000 disc for the sellers, so above average yet again. Nanotransistors, really strong performance, getting back to 6,000 disc here, and again right here, if you had that late May, it looked like, all right, we're staying below 5,000 disc. What am I? Well, if you bought for less than 5,000 disc, you're now selling it for almost 6,000 disc on a bit of a lack of supply. So it's definitely been a nice recovery over the last couple of months, basically the summer months. Phenolic composites next. Well, not that great a recovery, coming from 3,500 earlier last year, but at least we're away from the bottoms, so that's kind of okay. And then we have the ceramic fibers. Look at that late jump to an above average price. 600 for the sellers, 525 for the buyers, and again here in mid-May you could have bought this for less than 400 disc. Patience is also a virtue in the market. General trend in advanced materials is obviously back to average prices and even slightly above average prices. Let's take a look at the impact on the Tech2 ships then. 3330. And see if we can spot anything here. So we've got the Aries super flat below 27 million ISK. Yeah, 27.5 for the sellers, 25 million for the buyers. It's been here for quite a while. It's up to you to decide here. This does feel a little bit of a gamble because of how super stable this price is, but you are buying these for 25 million ISK, which is really cheap for a Tech2 frigate. The gamble is, will we at some point see a sort of a deployment and a big Aries fleet being lost or something like that? That would create this spike. It is potentially possible, and below 25 million is not bad if you look at this entire chart. So it's been here for a couple of months by this at this point, but potentially this is still okay for the Aries. Then the Basilisk is in its recovery phase and actually jumping up a little bit more from last week. So that's the in-between place, 267 for the sellers, 227 for the buyers. Quite a bit of a margin opening up here. Actually, 267 is an above average sell price. And so here, well, if you have made the investment down here at this bottom, you can try to sell right now, but it's not the right time to invest in basilisks. The Cerberus is recovering from also a bit of an above average price here, so nowhere near. We should be below 230 on the buyers before you want to jump in. That's a big no again. Then we get the Crow. The Crow did jump to less than 27.5 million. Look at the bottom, 25 million, and the buyers are 25.8, 31 million for the buyers. A bit of a recovery for the Crow. Basically 10 days ago was the perfect time to grab a couple below 25 million if I'm not mistaken. Guardian also recovering, right? Recovering. Advanced Moon Materials recovering. Well, here are the Take-Two ships recovering a bit as well. 250 for on average for the Guardian. One seller coming in with quite a few at 234, but most after that going for almost 250 million is, yeah, it's not the right time to invest. The Heretic, after recovering a little bit as well, is now working its way back down a bit. Buyers at 64 million though, bit of a lack of supply, 82 almost for the sellers. So this is again back on a more average place where it's difficult to actually say, all right, I'm gonna buy or I'm gonna try to sell at this price point. The Stealth Bombers are coming next. Those still have some volatility in them. But for a lot of the other Take-Two ships right now, it's very difficult to make the trades happen unless we see volatility come back. So here we've got the Hound, and yeah, Stealth Bombers with the Sino change will be considered part of the meta, I think, if you want to harass bigger guys and some of their PvE activities. So bottom here at 26.3 million went up to 37 million. Is still trading for 35 million, so you can definitely still sell them at a great price, and buyers are still above 31 million ISK. So this one is still in a sell territory right now. Then we've got the Ishtar. After a bit of volatility here, went up to 280 million ISK, is now going back down. 223 for the sellers, 206 for the buyers. I guess with all the chaos in Nullsec, there's no need to replace the VNIs with Ishtars, and we're back to a less than average price for the Ishtar. Where are the buyers at? 206. That's actually straight up low at this point. If we try to get 205 to show up, yeah, that's gonna be, god damn it. Still not. Well, it is if we keep an eye on this one. 200 million to 10, so it's around here for the buyers. That is already quite low. If you're looking for that one investment, that's a bit risky because you do what basically need then like an Ishtar fleet to be part of the Nullsec meta and to get lost, although it is possible. I think it's definitely a pretty unique ship in what it does, that it is possible that someone tries something like that. Then yeah, buying for less than 210 is already a pretty good deal. Then we've got the Manticore. Again, look at that volume spike, but unfortunately not going low enough. We need to see less than 28 million for the buyers before we jump in. 35 million is quite an okay sell price, but you can see that the peaks can go up to 40 million ISK here. Then we've got the Munin. That was slowly edging up to above 280 million and is now going back down a bit on fresh supply, of course. If you see this slow trend of like about 1.5 months to get to a peak price, then you are going to start to see a supply reaction. And so here are the Munins. 278 for the sellers, 257 for the buyers, trading above average. Nice recovery again this summer. Then we get the Nemesis. This is the volatility that we're talking about here. We actually have data point at 26 million ISK, going back up right now. 34 million for the sellers, 29 million for the buyers. What's a little bit of a threat here is that we'll start to see a decrease in volatility in these Stealth Bombers, and that will basically land on like 30 million on average and stay there for the foreseeable future. We'll have to see how that works, of course. The Oneros is back down. This one now buyers at 170, sellers at 190. This is definitely a yep. If you're feeling like you need to have a Tech 2 investment, you could do the Oneros, but as I always warn you guys, look at these volumes. They are very low. So you could, I think, try to grab one Oneros at 170. Its potential, or even over the course of last year, has been around 220 million ISK. That's not bad. 50 million up. That's pretty good, about a third of the price. But it's not going to be easy to make that trade happen, especially if you go with multiple buy orders here. That's going to be very risky. But this is clearly one that is on the downtrend, still oversupplied. There's no demand. 170 for the buyers is pretty low. Then we've got the Purifier. Look at that nice volatility. A 1-year high points about a week ago, up to 50 million ISK, down to 43.5 million. Buyers are still at 36 million. So this is basically still a sell order territory as well. Then we've got the Saber that went down to 65 million. It's going back up in price a little bit, but very muted. 68 for the sellers. Yeah, that's hardly a move. This is another one of those long-term potentials, I think, because buyers are at 62 million below the entire charts. But don't, I mean, it's been here for quite a while. So basically here again, Saber, it's been here for quite a while. Remember, the test cultures market has been here for quite a while, and then remember what happens in advanced PM material. At some point this does come back, but that's when you gotta be careful with your volumes. If you already have a couple of Sabers, be careful to add to that. But yeah, 62 million for the buyers is really cheap for a Saber. Then we've got the Scimitar, actually a bit of volatility and going back up in price. 260 million for the sellers, 230 for the buyers. Yeah, if you bought these for less than 230 and you're now up to 260, that is not bad at all. And then we get the Stiletto finally, decently flat and still above 30 million ISK. There's not much to say there. That's not where you're gonna trade. So yeah, we do see Advanced Moon Materials, bit of a recovery in the last couple of months, and so we see that quite a few of the Tech 2 ships are back to average, even slightly above average prices, and we have to really dig and take some risks if we want to invest in Tech 2 right now. Oneros is one of them, Saber is one of them, but when will you be able to make that trade? That is a big question mark. Unlike stealth bombers, which tend to have a lot more volatility to them, very clear bottoms, 25 million for the Hound for instance, really obvious, and lots of potential even over the last year. So that's the situation in the Tech 2 market. Next up we have the Tech 3 market, coming in at 41.30. Like that, and let's start with what I was considering to be the healthy market. Of course, tactical destroyers responding really well to supply, demand and price changes. Here we have the Confessor, 39 million for the sellers, 35 million for the buyers. Bit of pressure due to fresh supply. Look at that, that's quite a bit more supply than we normally see, driving the price back down from 41 to 39 million. And so on that oversupply we are going back down in price, but we're still doing okay. We're just dipping below 40 million ISK. Then we get the Headgate that went to a 1-year high here of 50 million ISK. That of course is now down to less than 45 million ISK, 45 for the sellers, 41 for the buyers. And to my surprise, I mean, we're still seeing supply, but it's already slowly drying up. And I wonder why people would be bringing in so many Confessors in the last 24 hours when they could have tried to make Hecates and sell those at quite a premium. So a bit counter to what we saw in the last couple of months of a very healthy market. This one is not entirely normal, entirely logical from the supply demand standpoint. Why would we see a slowdown in supply for the Hecate and an increase for the Confessor when the Confessor started so much lower? 5 million. I mean, that's 10%. That's pretty reasonable thing to want to go after. Next up we have the Jackdaw, flat at 40 million ISK. So here I'm expecting an in-between picture, and exactly we've got here 89 starting, 47.13. Rest is doing quite okay. So sellers above 40 million, buyers at 37. So maybe that is, let's see, buyers here at 41, buyers here at 35. So here I am also starting to see perhaps a bit of a drop in demand show up in this tactical market. So the Jackdaw in between, Okay, supply 40 million. Confessor, a bit of a surprise oversupply situation here. Buyers down to 35 million ISK. That is a bit counter to what we expected. Let's hope that that does not keep going for next week. And then the Hecate, slight drop in supply on a drop in price. That's actually decently normal as well. And then finally we've got the Zwepel that is flat at 38 million ISK. Supply wise, nothing crazy. 39 million for the sellers, 35 million for the buyers. Yeah, Confessor buy orders getting close to those Zwepel buy orders is kind of a strange one. Next up, if you got the cruisers, here is the Legion staying flat at 190 at a high point. Bit of a lack of supply here. Demand, yeah, 172, sorry. And this is basically a big margin that has opened up. A real listing of 200 units at 200 million is to try and force the market back up, is what I'm seeing here. Competition is starting now here, slowly driving the price back down. But this was the danger of the cruiser market when we hit these bottom prices on zero supply, practically zero supply. I think there were even less ships available on the market than we see now. Let's see if the trade hub, nope, that doesn't really have anything to do with it. So here we clearly see that the cruiser market, strategic cruiser market, is quite different from the Confessor market. It's rife with potential manipulation. I think this is just manipulation. Buy it, relist it at 200 million, try to get a profit out of that. With the Loki then, this one is flat on a slightly below average price. Volume wise, this is quite a bit better, up down to 189 million for the sellers, 171 again for the buyers. So this is just more difficult to manipulate because of the amount of ships and orders that are available here, and also the range between the highest sellers and the lowest sellers is already quite high. And so as a result here, the Loki market a bit more normal, you could say. Fresh supply in the last 24 hours, nothing too crazy, although 23, 16 and 30 is quite a decent amount, but with the price below average, well, this is not completely abnormal either. Then we've got oh, and especially for the most popular one, of course, the Loki. Despite the fact that its price is below average, it's still 190 million. It's still competing with the Legion for the price. Then we've got the Proteus, flat a bit above average, but yeah, above average for a Proteus is 170 million. Buyers are at 150. That's a pretty big margin. And then here you can see that supply is actually pretty low. This could just get snatched up. I mean, it's what is it? If you disregard the one at 200 million, it's less than 100 chips and then get relisted at a higher price. It is possible, but of course for the least popular cruiser, you're not gonna do that first. Here, you're gonna try with the Legion first. And then finally we get the Tengu, that is, well, around average, flat just below 180. So 172 in fact for the sellers, 151 for the buyers. And here again, availability is quite a bit better. It's gonna be harder to completely manipulate this market. Supply is pretty decent, and price back to, well, average, maybe even a touch below average for the Tengu as well. So for the strategic cruiser market, you get a big difference between the popular ships of the moment, Tengu, Loki, where you've got enough supply that it's not going to be too easy to manipulate. And then you get the Legion that's finding itself in this rough spot right now, I think due to manipulation. And then of course the Proteus, which 150 million for the buyers, it's pretty cheap for its strategic cruiser, but it's just so out of the meta that there's nobody bringing ships to the market either. And so this could very easily get snagged out. I mean, below 190, it's really not that many ships, and the price goes down to 170, which is kind of crazy, unlike a couple dozen ships. And so this one is primed to crater down because of the margin between sellers and buyers on any fresh supply, or, well, just buy 50 of them, manipulate the price to wherever you want to. You can try it, but of course it is for a not very popular ship, so less likely to happen here than in the Legion. And yeah, then we still have the extra product. Of course, we're gonna take a look at the recon ships that will have been impacted severely by the change to the Cynos. So that's coming in at 48 minutes. like that. And let's go take a look at, well, you could say from a price perspective, from a popularity perspective, as one of the favorite ships for, or ship classes for CCP, cruisers, advanced cruisers, recon ships. Let's go for Amarr first. So here is the Curse, and this is the Nullsec Blackout, of course, where it jumped from around 210 million to a high point of 380 million ISK. But this is not the one that can still fit a Cyno. This is the one that's immune to the D-scan, and of course with the Nullsec Blackout increased in popularity quite a lot, recovered very quickly back to its normal price, or decently quickly I should say, about 1.5 months or a good month before that happened. So the Curse is trading 240 for the sellers, 193 for the buyers. That is back to an affordable, okay range, but this is again the CCP impact. And now we're talking about the Pilgrim. Look at that volume spike on the announcement of the Cyno change. Normal price 250 million ISK, now selling for 350 million ISK. Buyers coming in at 300. So we get another spike. How long will that last? Well, this one may be a bit different, of course, because this is the Cyno ship. You can no longer just use a rookie ship if you're a freighter pilot. Well, you can't just put your Cyno on your Kal anymore. You're gonna want an alternative here as well. So that's the spike that's happening right now. 350 was it? So the Falcon is actually the one. All right, 375 million for the sellers, 300 million for the buyers. Normal price 200 million ISK. So that's yeah, almost a 100% increase in price. And look at the volume spike. The Rook, of course, has that little bump as well for the Nullsec Blackout, but it was not as pronounced as with the Curse, because the Curse, of course, lots of drones, potentially great PvE ship for the sneaky PvEers in Nullsec. Maybe still something that I should try to do myself now that the price has recovered. If I want to do another Nullsec experiment, it's probably gonna be a Curse potentially. Then we've got the Arazu, again Force Recon. So as a result, starting price 200 to 250 million ISK, now selling for 390 million ISK, 305 for the buyers. So this is again the Cyno change showing up on the market. Lachesis, not a bad jump either here, from 180 to 280 with the Nullsec Blackout, currently selling for 217, buyers back down to 180. So this clearly has been absorbed by the game. Looks like the Nullsec Blackout, I mean, it changed the dynamic in Nullsec, but the recon ships have not substantially gained from that either. They've not completely crushed the meta. And then we get the Hugin, also here a little bit of a spike, not as big as the others. And then the Rapier though, a normal price less than 250, now going for 324 million, least popular one apparently, 240 still for the buyers. So yeah, those are the recon ships. We've got with the, I'm not sure if we should, are these like force recons or something? No, let's call them the D-scan immune recons. We had the spike last time, especially here for the Curse with the Nullsec Blackout, and then now the Pilgrim is right in vogue, of course, because it will become one of the Cyno ships in the game. I guess I should quickly touch on the Covert Ops, the Black Ops battleships as well. Let's take a quick look at that one. Definitely a volume spike, but here the price, well, from 1.1 to 1.5 billion ISK. I mean, this is a price range that's completely different. Here's the Widow, also volume increase. Then we've got the Sin. Let's take a look at that one. Look at the volume increase. Prices above average, but it is not like the 70 80% increase in price that we see in the Covert Ops themselves, but the volume reaction is definitely there as well. These start at $1 billion though, and they're now going for 1.5 to 1.6 billion, so it's obviously an increase in price, but look at the volumes that are available. This is already in a completely different range for the players to use and lose on a Cyno, so people will definitely be moving to the recon cruisers for that Cyno activity. In my opinion, you might try to bring a Black Ops and to really tank it. Not sure how you're gonna do that, because if I'm not mistaken, they don't have the best resists. Let's take a quick look here. Yeah, this is not exactly in line with most other Tech 2 resists, so it's gonna be very tricky to make these really tanky. but that's gonna be basically your only option if you want to bring a Cyno to a contested field and you want some HP on your Cyno, and you're gonna need something like a Black Ops Battleship, almost 1.5 billion ISK in order to get that going. Yeah, very, very big change to the game. And looking at it from this perspective, just from the cost increase and potential loss for something that was almost cost-free before, I do understand that most salt will be coming from the Cyno change, because this is huge for people that use it, and in Nullsec, well, everybody uses it right now. So that's gonna be it for this EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.